So welcome to another Hippocratic Adventures interview. I am Dr. Shwini Bapat, and today we are very excited to have Dr. Jessica MacHue with us. She is a family medicine doctor based in Okinawa, Japan, where she has lived for the past 3 years. She works for a company called Veterans Evaluation Services, doing compensation and pension exams for veterans. Dr. MacHue, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We asked our members to submit questions, and we have quite a few, so let's get started. Can you tell us about your story? How is it that you ended up in Japan?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess it started with my husband. We met in my 4th year of medical school, and he had signed up for the Navy before we ever met. So, of course, we get married. He completed his residency. I completed mine. He's also a family doctor. But now he's active duty in the Navy. And when he got orders to Okinawa, I came with him. So we packed everything up, including our 2-month-old baby at the time, and moved across the world.
That is
so
impressive.
It's been kind of wild. Yeah. After my residency, I worked as a hospitalist for a year in North Carolina. He was at Camp Lejeune and then moved here. So I didn't really have a great opportunity to get my career up and running before we came out here. So it's been a little bit stressful and difficult in that regard, but I found a way to make it work.
Yeah. And why did you choose Japan, or did you have a choice in that?
We basically, what they did was, when my husband was in his last year of residency, they offered up about 6 or 7 locations and said, fight amongst yourselves to decide who's going where. And our options were not terribly appealing, except our options were either he would be on a ship most of the year, or he would be, we'd be going to Guam, all things I didn't want to do. And so we thought we would make the best out of a bad situation, because at the time we thought that, we didn't really want to come here. We're not terribly adventurous people. Well, we weren't at the time, and moving here has definitely pushed us much further out of our comfort zone. So it ended up being a blessing for us.
Yeah. And when you arrived in Japan, did you speak Japanese, or?
No, not at all. But we have the benefit. So because we're here on military orders, and there's quite a large community of Americans on Okinawa. There are multiple military bases, and people from, Air Force. The Air Force has a really large base. There's an Army base, and several Marine Corps bases, and then a Navy base, or 2 Navy bases. So we have a very large military presence here in Okinawa. So people go their whole time living here without learning much Japanese at all, and they do just fine. We have started learning just because we enjoy it and wanted to learn something new.
Yeah.
So
very cool. And how did you approach finding a job in Japan?
I was lucky in that my husband worked in the family medicine clinic at the Naval Hospital, and he knew a couple other doctors at the hospital who told me about this opportunity. So one of the doctors who currently works there is a retired Navy doctor who has a civilian, I think he has a contractor job. He kind of started the program for VES here in Okinawa.
Got it.
So that's how I heard about it, because I had tried initially to get a job at the Naval Hospital, and that has proven to be difficult.
Okay. And why has it been difficult, out of curiosity?
There's a lot of reasons for that. Um, a lot of it has to do with bureaucracy and administrative, uh, barriers. A lot of it has been due to turnover. I'm now on my third HR person
Oh
at
gosh.
the Naval
Okay.
Hospital. Yeah. So since I got here, um, and the director of medical services has changed over. So it's
Got
just the
it.
nature of being a military person. It's, somebody's always coming in and somebody's always gone out.
Got it.
Yeah, so I actually just in the last few days was offered a job at the Naval Hospital finally,
Wow,
but I've been trying for a while. Yeah.
that's
So
amazing.
I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see how it
And
goes.
so it sounds like there are positions within the Naval Hospital for both civilians as well as military positions. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes. I'm not sure that the Air Force offers any civilian jobs. I know that they
Okay.
do for nurses. I don't know for sure about doctors, because the Air Force has their own medical presence over on Kadena Air Force Base. But at the Naval Hospital, they do hire civilians. And when my husband first arrived at the clinic, there was a civilian working there, and I was
Okay.
supposed to be taking his job. But of course, this is now just happening for me. So, but in many of the departments, they will hire civilians. Um, they're just not always posted, like this position.
Mm,
Um, Technically, they said it was posted, but it wasn't widely available on the internet. So it's just one of those things, because they knew I was here, they want to go for a local hire.
yeah.
So that gives me the benefit, as opposed to somebody from outside the island applying. The other thing is, because I'm a military spouse, I have spousal preference.
Yeah.
Um, and then if somebody who is a veteran applied, they have veterans preference. So
Got it.
it's a certain benefit that you get if you're connected to the military, that you're sort of given more points
Yeah.
in the system
Yeah.
for the job.
That makes sense.
So,
Um,
yeah, but there are jobs all over at military bases around the world. I know that there was an emergency medicine position up at Yokosuka, up by in mainland Japan,
got it.
for emergency medicine that was posted last year. I haven't looked in a while. It's like might still be available, but most of those jobs are on USA Jobs,
Got it.
the
So,
website.
yeah,
Yeah.
so a good place for someone who is looking for jobs within um, the auspices of the government is to look at usajobs.gov.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
And there's a difference between GS and contractor.
mhm.
So the position that I was just offered is a GS position. So,
What
and the
what
difference
is
being that,
yeah.
yeah, GS is, you can actually go online and look up the GS pay scale, and it goes from the position that most physicians are offered is a GS 14. And that's somebody with like a PhD level or equivalent degree.
Yeah.
And then they have different steps that you're offered. So I'm not quite sure what my compensation will be at this point.
Okay.
Because like I said, this is still a new process. But I know that often physicians are bonused to kind of compensate for the difference in salary.
Okay.
The other thing to keep in mind though with the GS position is that often what you won't see in your salary and like the job posting is a housing allowance and something
Mm.
called COLA, which is the cost of living adjustment, I believe, or cost of living allowance. And it's basically, um, depending on where you are in the world, they give you extra money. So we get extra money every month with my husband's military pay to adjust for the expense of living in Okinawa, because it is a little more expensive to live here.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the housing allowance can be thousands of dollars every month for
Nice.
GS and for contractors. Yeah. So that basically covers your housing,
Yeah.
your utilities. So you don't have to pay your living expenses essentially, other than food,
Oh,
out of your salary. So
that's incredible. That's awesome.
yeah. So there's a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
So all the contractors here and the GS folks here have like the craziest houses on the beach, and or like overlooking the water. It's
Yeah.
it's wild.
That's amazing. What other, so it sounds like before this recent development, which by the way, is awesome and incredible.
Yeah, thank you.
What other positions were you considering? And then we'll talk about your position at VES as well.
Into the positions that I was considering here,
Yes, correct.
well, the options are pretty slim. There's pretty much
Okay.
Naval Hospital and VES. I was just told recently about another opportunity that is a contracted position, not through the military. It's like it would be a subcontracted situation. But it's doing, sorry, my dog is barking. It's dealing with PHAs, which are like periodic health assessments that the military members have to do. But I don't know a whole lot about that. So there's really not a whole lot here in terms of options. Yeah. So I am not eligible to be licensed in Japan, and I don't speak Japanese. So that pretty much rules out me working out in town. Yeah, I speak just Totoro Japanese. That's it.
You're learning. So tell us about your work at VES.
Yeah, so I do compensation and pension exams. So basically what that means is I see a lot of service members that are either separating or retiring from the military. And those, basically what those members do is they, when they're getting out, they fill out their information on a website called eBenefits, which is basically like all their medical claims. So anything that's arisen as a result of their military service or during their military service. And I'm the doctor that reviews their medical records and examines them. Some of my exams are, if somebody has like up to 16, 20 medical conditions or medical claims, sometimes those exams can last like 4 hours. You're in a room 4 or 5 hours with a person.
Wow.
So, okay. And then there are other times where, I just see somebody for one claim. Okay. So that's, in and out. So it just depends on what my schedule looks like. Yeah. I make my own schedule, which is really nice. I just email them the days that I'm available and they fill my schedule for me. So
that's awesome. And this is something that you do in person in Okinawa, it sounds like.
Yes, okay. That's right. So there, like I said, there's a huge military presence here. There's also a huge veteran population here because a lot of folks are either contractors or they have married local Okinawan people and stayed. There's a lot of those. The same is true in mainland too. But of course, having a larger military presence here, there's more people here in Okinawa than there are in mainland.
Got it. And you communicate in English, I'm assuming, in this position.
Yeah. All of the people that I see are American veterans.
Got it.
So, yeah, occasionally I'll have a Japanese spouse who will come in, but always with the veteran, and the veteran has always spoken English. Okay. So.
Okay. And what malpractice insurance do you use for this work, or is that provided through the company?
The company provides it. So, but I don't do any direct patient care. So I'm not prescribing any medications or offering any treatments. Everything that I do is strictly, physical exam and assessment of the veteran and then reviewing their medical records.
Got it. Okay. And what were the challenges that you encountered with this transition?
Well, I would say learning the system
Yeah.
was difficult. Learning the VEA or the VA language, what they prefer, because some of the stuff is kind of goofy. It's mostly, they want legal type stuff. I'm trying to write in like a doctor would, and they want me to write, like for a lawyer.
Yeah.
So, just learning the type of language that they're looking for, and so I don't get my reports kicked back. The worksheets are pretty tedious. There's a lot of clicking, scrolling, minutia, going through records. And the other challenge is that, I have my days where I see people, but then I spend, just as much time filling in the reports.
Yeah.
So so the paperwork is not ideal, but the things that I like about it are the flexibility. And the pay, I think, is pretty reasonable for what it is.
Okay. And are you, you don't have to answer this if you don't feel comfortable, but are you paid on an hourly basis, or are you salaried, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I'm paid by DBQ, which is the Disability Benefits Questionnaire. So those are the worksheets that I have to fill out. So, for example, if I have somebody who has a neck pain, back pain, allergies, and I don't know, foot pain, for 4 worksheets, I get paid for each worksheet. So if I have somebody who is separating or retiring, they have a range of worksheets. So like 1 to 4 worksheets is this much, 5 to 10 is this much, So it just depends on the type of exam. And then sometimes I'm asked to offer up a medical opinion. So basically, most of the time, those are, the service member is claiming this condition, but it appears that it occurred prior to service. Give your opinion based on whether or not this is a new condition from service, or if it predated service, or if you have somebody who's been out for a while and they're coming to you saying, I have, knee pain. Well, they're claiming knee pain. You have to look through their medical records and prove that their knee pain started in service.
Oh, wow.
So sometimes, if they don't have any documentation of any knee problems, then, you can't prove it's service connected.
Got it. Okay.
So I have to provide a medical opinion on whether or not it is service connected or not service connected.
Got it. Anything that you had wished you had known in advance of this move, or?
Oh man, I think I had expected it to be a little bit easier to get a job at the Naval Hospital, because I had, spoken to other people who had been lucky in the past, and nobody said that it was really easy, but I didn't expect it to take this long.
Yeah.
So, and I also, I didn't know about this opportunity until I got here. So it was nice to be able to work, especially because it's always a huge, it's a huge fear of a lot of us in medicine to have any gaps in our work history. That was a huge concern of mine. So I am thankful that I had this to fill the gap. I also started a master's in public health since I was out here and had the time to fill the gap. I'm also interested in public health, but it's just something that makes me, a little bit anxious. Because we are going to return to the States and try and get a job.
Yeah, I think, that's really interesting because that's actually a theme that's come up a lot with the people that we've talked to who have transitioned
Yeah.
outside the US, where especially when they transition to a country where they didn't speak English, for example, um,
Hmm.
where the process of licensing takes a pretty long time. Yeah, that was having that gap. Sometimes it was on the order of years that they didn't practice patient care in person. And that was
Yeah.
something that made them very anxious and very nervous. And a lot of them shared that when they did eventually get their license, got their language up to speed, when they did go back to practice in person, they did have to like review the latest and greatest in their field. And
Yeah.
that the first like handful of patients that they saw, they were like really worried that they wouldn't know what to do with them. So I
Yeah.
think that's like something really common that we've heard.
Yeah.
And you said you had a 2-month old when you moved, so it sounds like maybe they're 3 or 4 years old at this
She's
point.
almost 3. Yeah,
Okay,
next month she turns 3.
awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
So, yeah, thank you. That's been another thing that I didn't really expect. I had expected to work. If we were in the States, I would have had a
Yeah,
full-time job. I did have a
yeah,
full-time job right
yeah,
before she
yeah.
was born. I had to leave work to be induced actually
Oh
for,
wow, okay.
yeah, so I expected to work.
Yeah,
And so being here I've been at home with her a
yeah,
lot more.
yeah,
Um, and that's been nice to be able to spend some time on myself and spend some time with her
yeah.
and with my husband. And we've, taken up some new hobbies, and we've really, it's allowed me to enjoy my life here.
Mm,
So having this time,
yeah,
so I am thankful for it. So with all the stress it's also given me some gifts.
yeah. What are the new hobbies that you've taken up?
Diving.
Oh my God, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. The diving in Okinawa is incredible.
Wow.
Um, I'm actually getting advanced certified on Monday and
Oh
Tuesday.
my God.
So,
Do you go
yeah.
like every week or how does that work?
We go a couple times a month.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
and we're moving next week down
Yeah.
to the seawall, which is only a couple miles from where we live on base currently. So we're moving off base, and our off base house is right on the water. It's going to
Oh
be an
my God.
apartment, but
Yeah.
um, and we can walk from our apartment to the dive site. There's a shore dive site that's incredible for soft coral, and we've seen octopuses
Oh
there,
my
and
God.
there's cuttlefish and all sorts of fish, and
That's
we've seen
incredible.
eels.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And is your
So
daughter then in preschool? Is she entering preschool or is she in
she's in a
daycare?
Japanese
Wow.
daycare, Montessori
Okay.
school.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's all in Japanese or?
There are American and Japanese kids in the school,
Okay.
and most of their teaching is in English, but they do
Yeah.
teach in Japanese as well. So she knows, I think, more Japanese than she lets on,
That's
for sure.
incredible.
Yeah,
That's
but
incredible.
I love her school,
Yeah.
and it's less expensive than the States.
Oh, I can.
So everybody I know in the States is paying way more money than I am. And I feel like the experience that she has at her school
Yeah.
is fantastic.
That's
Yeah, that's one of the
incredible.
benefits of being here.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Any regrets? And yeah, any regrets, but maybe before that, how long are you guys planning on staying in Japan or you're not sure yet?
We have one more year.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, yeah, my husband, so it will be a total of 4 years that we're here in
Okay.
Okinawa. Um, I would say I don't really have any regrets, but I do, of course, COVID really like
Yeah.
rained on our parade over here,
Yeah.
because this is a great location to jump off and go travel, and we had
Yeah.
traveled pretty aggressively before we got locked down. Like we
Yeah.
came back from New Zealand and 3 days later we were locked down on
Mm.
this island and told we couldn't leave anymore because of COVID.
Got
So we came in right under the wire,
Yeah.
right when stuff was, it was March.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when it started going around the world.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for chatting with us. I think this has been
Yeah.
incredibly helpful to hear about your experience.
I do want to say one more thing about
Yeah.
VES for
Yeah. Sure.
people that are curious. There are opportunities other than in Okinawa. There are
Okay.
opportunities all over the US
Okay.
for travelers and for people that just want to stay like close to home. And there are opportunities all around Asia. I know that
Okay.
people go to Singapore, people go to mainland Japan, the Philippines. Where else? I haven't heard of anybody going to Guam, but definitely Singapore, mainland, and the Philippines.
Okay.
And then there are also opportunities in Europe, but the
Oh,
licensing and requirements might be different there.
yeah.
I know for sure Germany.
Okay.
There are some countries in Central and South America as well
Wow.
that have VES evaluations, but I think Costa Rica has the VES does exams, but I think you have to be licensed in Costa Rica
Okay.
if I remember correctly. So like there are opportunities all over the place. They're just not all like this. I know that a lot of doctors, especially mental health providers, get flown out here because up until recently we didn't have anybody full time. We
Okay.
have a couple doctors that live here on the island that do general medical exams, but for psychiatrists, psychologists, and neurologists, there are opportunities to do traumatic brain injury exams. So those have to be done by one of those specialties, and I think maybe neurosurgery can do them too. What else? Audiology is huge. I know an audiologist who comes to the office, not so much anymore because of coronavirus, but he was living in the Philippines and just traveling back and forth to Japan, and then he moved to Tokyo for a little while, was traveling back and forth to Okinawa. Yeah, just kind of like floating around, doing veterans exams. So yeah.
And most of these opportunities, it sounds like they're in person, right? They're not through telemedicine. They're in person at whether it's Singapore or Japan.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and they do fly people out. So I've met several people that before the pandemic, people that they flew out from the States to come here to Okinawa for a couple of days. And then usually they fly them to mainland Japan. So for people that wanted something that was not a long-term, a long-term change of address, they could just travel and work and then go home.
Wow.
So that, they VES pays for your flights and hotels and everything while you're working.
Okay. Wow. That's very cool. That's good to know.
So there's definitely opportunities. I've been offered to travel, but of course, I don't because of my daughter.
Yeah.
But it's been offered.
It's possible.
So yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you.
I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you. I think that'll be of interest to a lot of our members. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for joining us. It's really been awesome to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So to our members, until next time, remember that together we can dream beyond borders.